I'd like to welcome Nnamdi to the stage. I'm sure everyone knows Nnamdi here. Again, when Nnamdi submitted an abstract, I was absolutely thrilled because every time I've heard him talk, I'm at the edge of my seat. And I believe, and the other important thing about what Nnamdi's about to talk about is it's getting to the heart of why we're here, the kind of collective identity, the fact that our own collective identity was threatened. And I believe Nnamdi, Magda isn't joining us today. She has teaching commitments, but she has, as far as I'm aware, co-authored and has a presence in this. So if you'd like to welcome Nnamdi Madichie to the stage. He's going to talk about the changing identity of higher education.
Right, thank you, Tom. Oh gosh, I'm nervous. Right, okay, let me just start by saying Magda sends best wishes to the audience. Unfortunately, she's got teaching commitments, but she's listening on the stream from Lincoln. This presentation is primarily, although she might not really want it said that way, but it primarily revolves around Magda Reed. Just a brief background to who Magda is and how we came about doing this. It's not our first joint work. So I taught Magda Reed at the University of East London. It was part of my first full-time job in academia. That was probably 2004, 2005. She was on the MBA, and it is not your traditional MBA. So we started out on a very controversial note. Controversial in the sense that when she sends an email and I reply, I've got to CC my line manager. Now, that's a very striking thing because throwing somebody in front of students and the students wondering what qualifies me to be in charge or stand in front of her, she requested to see my CV as an MBA supervisor. Why not? Why not? I'll show you some of our profiles. She's a serial entrepreneur, a practitioner that wants an MBA in a sector that she's actually trying to make an impact on, but needed some kind of theoretical anchor. And there is this sort of disconnect that this presentation is trying to draw our minds back to. The title of this paper should have probably ended up with a question mark. We're not making a definitive statement, but we're just putting across food for thought. Right, so next slide, please. Oh, right, me, right? Okay. Right, the order of names here, being the humble person that she is, when I sent her the slides after we agreed, she said, why have you put my name first? And I said, it's your story. So, kicking off from there, let's have a quick look at some of the key things here. We're looking at three different perspectives here, and we're thinking in terms of identity, deconstruction, and possibly reconstruction. So you're looking at a situation where you have an intersection between three key parties with implications for a fourth party, which is society at large. So you're looking at the students, you're looking at the provider, and of course I don't really like using the word arm twister, the regulatory bodies. When I sent in this abstract the first time, it was probably about 3 pages long, and I've exchanged about 250 emails with Tom saying, tone it down, shorten it, Delhi doesn't exist anymore. Think about graduate outcome survey. So Delhi is the culprit here, destination of leavers of higher education. And that's where the regulatory bodies come in. So one of the key things in terms of reframing and sticking to the theme of this conference is all about identity. So when you get the graduate outcome survey that probably gets plugged into the ranking of universities in terms of demonstrating impact, they're trying to see where your students are 6 months after graduation. Are they in managerial positions? So my initial posturing is, do they take into consideration the types or kinds of students that the higher education providers actually reach out to? I'm talking widening participation students at the back of my mind. I've taught students at Bloomsbury Institute from different and diverse backgrounds. I've taught a DJ in my class. I've taught an Uber driver. I've taught somebody that exports, that is in food exporting business. Now, because they've come to get a university education does not necessarily mean that they intend to be managers in a FTSE 500 company or whatever the case is. The question then is how much impact or how much higher education providers helping to capacitate and redevelop the identities of these individuals, most of whom sometimes actually are self-funded. Now that's something that's quite interesting. And that will take us to the guiding principles that Magda put forward with that citation. And we're talking in terms of openness, and something that I've always sort of championed is flexibility of courses. It's not about designing a course on Uber driving, but leaving an aperture open to embed real-time, real-life, practical case studies into the delivery. I'll just pause briefly to showcase what I call I just want to feature a module that's taught by one of my colleagues, Arif Zaman, which is critical issues in business and management. Very fluid, open, not subject specific. You can throw in anything there. And one of the key things that Arif has done with the module, which I embrace, somebody talked about, well, Cordelia, you talked about music. So there is the Universal Music Group that came into there. There is the movement towards the Commonwealth agenda. There is also the intention to understand how HE and the Sustainable Development Goals actually intersect. So it's sort of that flexibility within the module that enables developed students to actually have an impact, rediscover their identity, and stand tall when they're done, so to speak. So these are, I've had conversations with a couple of individuals I'm on a WhatsApp group with, and there is what they call the Quadrilateral Helix. I'm sure many of you must have heard about the triple helix. So when you're talking about triple helix, you're talking about, say, university, business, and governments. Then there's the quadruple, other stakeholders that are not directly involved, but are impacted upon by what you churn out as graduates. So that's something that's quite important to think in terms of. And there is also something that kind of underlies that song that we've been singing, Music on My Mind. That song we've been singing in terms of impact and, of course, the SDGs. One of those was the recent higher education ranking of universities. Based on what? The SDGs. How much of our curriculum is geared towards meeting those SDGs? For those that are unfamiliar, one of those is zero hunger, no poverty, decent work. How is decent work defined? What about self-employment? Do you have to be a manager to prove that you've actually achieved How about the managed? Now, that's something that's important to think in terms of, because the second keynote speaker came up with that quadrant about being competent and being unable to communicate. So when the students walk through your doors, they probably want those little soft skills to complement the hard skills that you can't teach them. So it's your ability to actually interrogate and make these things complementary. And of course, to give them that confidence to go out there and strut their stuff. That's the identity. So as providers, what is the higher education provider's identity? Is it an institution that champions the SDGs, widening participation agenda, equality, diversity, and inclusion? Or one that wants to churn out the next Bill Gates or any of the tech, Jeff Bezos, whatever the case is? And the regulatory authorities recognizing that impact. Magda sent a short video clip to share her experiences because I told her it was all about her. She toned it down. Unfortunately, the video clip came a bit late. I couldn't incorporate it. But I've asked somebody to actually put it on the charts for those of you that are streaming. So that is Magda's brief CV. MBA graduate, University of East London. Social entrepreneur. Now, I just needed to highlight that term, social enterprise. The first time I encountered, I must make that confession. Magda, I hope you're listening to me. The first time I encountered that term, social enterprise, was after meeting Magda. Because then she used to work for SEMVO, which is about voluntary sector organizations in the Humber region, in Hull, and that environment. Now, her focus or her interest was making that transition from voluntary sector organizations to social enterprises. That was what her MBA was on. And she was quite right in asking what qualifies me to actually supervise that project. Because what she did was to send me back to the drawing board to do my own independent research. So I had to be 2 steps ahead of the game. So I learned a great deal from that. I decided to return the favor by sending an abstract to a conference. When you got accepted, I said, Magda, we're going to a conference. And she goes, what? So put the slides together, just like we did today. Put the slides together. It's your work. You're going to that conference to talk about it. So she's an expert. She's competent. Going back to the second plenary, but was not particularly confident standing in front of her. Look at me, shivering. How many people are in here? It was a larger audience, and that was 2005. But she did it. This is where the video clip was supposed to come in, that she recorded and sent. Unfortunately, I'd already sent the slides before that happened. And why is music still coming up? So much music. Now, something that's quite important here, Matters Horizon and the Food for Thought. If you look at the second line underneath, what does effective teaching and learning require to make this happen? That intersection and bringing together of these stakeholders for that common good and social impact. These is entirely up to the institutions on how they interrogate that. Now, 2008 to 2020, the lockdown, the year of the lockdown. So that conference paper that was presented in 2005 got published in 2008, the middle box there, with the same lady. Then after that, 2008 was when I left the UK and I disappeared somewhere in the Middle East. I returned in 2015 thinking I've shaken off all my former students. Then here comes Magda knocking on my door. The other article is published by the official magazine of the Chartered Management Institutes, which Bloomsbury Institute is a big-time member of. and I'm pleased to say that I'm actually a fellow of that institute. And she comes and says, Nnamdi, I hope you're doing well. I said, no, this isn't sounding very, very nice. She said, right, I've got an idea. We want to talk about the life of the Lone Ranger, the solo self-employed, and what higher education institutions should know about them. I said, okay, have you got the write-up ready? She says, yes, but looks like I'd forgotten Magda. So it took about, I said, Magda, I haven't really got time for this now. Can you come back? And I said, no, it has to happen now. So it took us about 2 weeks of sleepless nights to put an article together, and it got published, and it's seriously trending. So I encourage you, I'm happy to share the link, because it actually captures the sort of identity that we're talking in terms of, and of course the interaction and intersections of the identities, whether it's trilateral or quadrilateral. Is there an identity mismatch? Question mark. I'll yield the space. Thank you. Yep, that's me done. Thank you.
Time for Q&A, so if we've got the microphones and then...
Thanks for the shameless plug. Check in the post. No, Nnamdi, just wanted to ask you about the, you talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, but I want to ask you about the value of teaching outside the classroom. Experiential education, yeah? So, and you know about Social Storm, which is an example of that, but clearly this is a big area, and I think it actually might blend and bring together you and Cordelia, yeah? Because you have your passion for creative industries, your interest in that area. Cordelia's looking at music. But I'm just wondering about what do you think we can do more with this whole area of experiential education in the light of two things in particular. One is the last year, where students have clearly had to, digital literacy has become a necessity for them in the last year. They've really had to embrace that. And the second thing is how more connected people have been to things like, things like music and art, because they've been thinking of it. So I just want to ask you about experiential education and what your thoughts are.
Good question, Arif. You put me on the spot there. Actually, I've had this conversation with both Anna and John in terms of especially using the case illustration of Bloomsbury Institutes on how you can actually do that. And one of those areas would be around two key modules besides CIBM. The independent learning module. That's a perfect opportunity for doing that. Then, of course, you have the business internship module. So students can actually break their study and engage in non-classroom-based teaching and learning. So that's a powerful way of looking at it. And it also reminds me of a presentation I did, a keynote speech I did at University of Ghana just before the lockdown. And I was just talking to people, and the head of department came around and said, I want you to meet these two guys. I said, who are they? He said, oh, they are doctoral students. Right. So that one is a musician, and that one is the manager. And I was going like, what? And they grilled me for about 2 hours on the creative industries and music. That was actually when that book project took root. So after that encounter and that presentation, I signed up a project. The book is going to be published anytime soon now on the creative industries and international business development in Africa. So good points. There are options. That internship, independent learning module, and of course, keep doing what you're doing with the Social Storm, because that's also very important. And finally, the Bloomsbury Institute Radio, Cordelia picked up on that. Multimedia assessments and all stuff like that. And having said that, come think of it, even in internship, you don't necessarily have to go and find a business outside. There are roles within Bloomsbury Institute. So somebody can do internship with Bloomsbury Radio. Yeah, learn the art of communication or interviewing, Graduate Assistance Center for Research and Enterprise. There are so many resources available that we take for granted. And it all revolves around that identity that I'm talking in terms of deconstruct, reconstruct, and move forward. Yes, any more thoughts?
All through the presentation. Thank you for that. So you asked a question, how can we make learning and teaching more effective? And I'm going to put my question and my comment in that area. Now, most of the time, you find out that in institutions, the teachers are the one learning, not the students, because they come there to improve their own learning rather than pass on something. Now, I think if you want to make learning and teaching more effective, there should be a kind of collaboration where there's shared ideas. That's why I believe in that social constructivism theory, that pedagogy, that learning should be situated learning and it should be experiential learning too. So that at the end of the day, we don't just produce students that have the head knowledge of the discipline, but in the marketplace, they can't perform because they have not done any of this before. So we find that most of the time, lecturers come to the class, they are the purveyor of knowledge, and they keep rolling out what they've learned or what they've read. And the students are just made to take notes and believe everything they've been told. And that's why I love what Ali was saying. We need to challenge things. Now, some of the things Ali said today, I've never heard before. I passed through, I did public law, I did constitutional law. But what I was told, the monarchy and parliamentary supremacy, super, and I took it away. Wow, monarchy, we can't change things. So we need to begin to challenge things and begin to change the ways we carry knowledge or pass knowledge across to people and not believing we know everything. So each year a teacher comes to class, he shouldn't come with the notes of last year. He must have done something to improve on the note of last year. What new knowledge have you brought that you are ready to share? Then don't assume you know everything, because not all students are conventional students. I went to uni at a very old age. Some of the lecturers that taught me I was older than them. So they won't think I would take it like an A-level student. I would challenge some of the things you say. So to make learning more effective, you should leave room for interaction and believe there must be a cross-fertilization of ideas and make the learning centered upon the community where the student will practice, let them know what actually it is, not just carrying their knowledge, particularly in law. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first. Good points you raised, and that is where two things I want to talk about come in. One of those is what you call co-creation, knowledge co-creation. So, yes, it's not just learning and teaching. It's learning, teaching, and assessment, and the constructive alignment of these. You cannot assess students on what they haven't actually learned or been taught. So the second one is, and it's something we're driving at Bloomsbury Institute, and everywhere I'm involved, is research-informed teaching. So you're looking for real-life, impactful case studies, rather than a case study from Harvard Business Review of 1999. So I tend to review a lot of manuscripts. If somebody comes with data from 2019, I become biased because we have the lost year. 2020 was a lost year. If it wasn't for you, it was for me. So if you don't capture what happened in the last 15 months, seriously, what are we talking about? So this is a very strong message to colleagues at Bloomsbury Institute in terms of developing the assessment for the forthcoming academic year. If you haven't updated your teaching materials, probably time to think about that. I'm not calling names like you did for law. Yes?
Okay, just to point on what you just mentioned, in terms of the module for the students, I think it needs to be centralized on individual students when lecturers are choosing module for students. For example, like myself, I'm a business person, and I chose a module last semester, a small business module. I chose that my first option. But I was given, sorry, just gone off my head.
She has to check her title. Bear with her.
I was given cross-cultural leadership of...
Cross-cultural management.
Yes. In as much as I like that topic, but my chosen topic module was on small business because I wanted to learn more about centralized, because this is me, I'm business is me, and I really want to dip more into it. But I was not given that first choice. So I think for the next semester or for the next student coming, lecturer need to be careful when you are choosing subjects for the students. Because there's a reason why I chose that as my first options. And there's a reason why each student chose whatever they're choosing as their first option. So I think we should give more inclusive or more attention to why does this person chose it as a first option. That has to be a reason, because I didn't choose that just for the sake of choosing it. I chose it for a reason, and I wasn't given. So if going to what you said, the lecturer wants to include the students as a partnership, I have, you need, and another thing you need to be aware of, your students are mature students. We are not 20-year-old coming from secondary school coming to learn. I have 15 years of experience in business, but I want something more, but I wasn't given the chance. So I loved what I didn't have any option, I had to like it. But I would have preferred to go for the small business thing. So I think it's really important that lecturers see students as partnership, not 20-year-old coming from with no experience at all. Because lecturers have something to learn from us as well. Because we are coming from the work aspects. We have business. I have my business for the last 15 years. And, but yeah, I just wanted to add on that. Yeah.
I like that. The beauty of it is that it wasn't a question. But moving away from that comfort zone that it wasn't a question, so I can just go back and chill. She is another case illustration of a potential identity mismatch. And it goes back to what the first plenary speaker was talking in terms about learning and development, and she tried to make a distinction between learning and development, and of course saying that learning was a lifelong process and development had a short shelf life. So basically, development kind of diminishes after 30. But when we have mature students with businesses being run for 15 years and thereabouts, we're definitely talking beyond that age. That so-called magical age of 30, when development starts to drop. So yes, you raise a very important point, because you've been running your business for 15 years, and it's obviously a small business. Then when you look at the provision, when you look at the core modules and the electives, you choose small business because you want to upskill and add those additional soft skills to a business. The life of a business, from the entrepreneurship theoretical lens, is that a successful business can be defined not necessarily in profitability terms, but any business that survives 3 years or more. We're talking about how many 3 years do we have in 15? 3 years. So technically speaking, you know your stuff.
That's right.
But what you want is the skill to capture the direction of travel. And that's something that's important, and I hope colleagues and institutions are listening to this, because that's the sort of intersection we're talking in terms of. So the institution has its own identity, but then again, it needs to be in alignment with the identity of the students. And of course, the regulatory authorities need to understand this. Thank you.